Their first task assignment was to do a quick write, and this served to be a pre-writing for the class. So the instructions were as follows. In a quick write response, what do you already know about solar energy? What is your opinion on the usage of solar energy as opposed to using fossil fuels to generate electricity? So they had to use this sheet to answer the question presented, and they were required to have at least 5 complete sentences done individually. So we did this as a whole class activity, and each person did their own work individually without sharing with anyone. On page 4, the students completed a rubric analysis. They were given a copy of the rubric, and they were asked to translate each aspect of the rubric from teacher talk into their own language, which I called student talk. So there were 7 points that they had to cover, and I wanted to see that they understood exactly how their assignment was going to be graded. In the classroom, each student had their own folder complete with the articles that they had to read already printed out for them. And the 4 articles they had to read were entitled Future Power, It's Time to Plug into Renewable Power, Solar's Moment in the Sun, and A Painful Eclipse. Page 5 was the beginning of task 3, which were the pre-reading strategies for the students. So on page 5, they had to make a list of 5 to 6 strategies that they use for understanding what they read. In other words, their reading comprehension skills. They also had to be prepared to share their answers in a discussion with their classmates. So after they wrote their 5 to 6 strategies that they use to understand what they read, they had to get together with other classmates who did the same assignment and get 3 more strategies that they didn't know before. On pages 6 through 9 of their writer's notebook, this is where the students recorded their active reading strategies. So for those pages, they had to make a list of vocabulary words from the articles that were of interest to them. And I was really careful to say the phrase of interest to you, because if you let them have the option of putting down words that they don't know, then the students will choose to say on the sheet, well, I know all the words, and there goes all the work and all the accountability for that sheet. So if you have them write words that are of interest to them and have them define them, then they're really buying into the paragraphs and the readings and actively trying to understand what they read. I had them complete the note-taking activity so that they would better understand the articles and learn the importance of taking active notes while they're reading something scholarly. The next task was for students to use graphic organizers to organize their thoughts and help them understand what they read. So first they had to do a Venn diagram in which they compared and contrasted fossil fuel energy with solar power energy. And in the middle of the diagram, they had to write things that were common to both sources of energy. Then students had to complete a spider map for each of the 4 articles. The main idea went in the center circle of the spider map, and supporting details went around the perimeter, which made the legs of the spider. After they completed the other graphic organizers, probably the most important one to complete was the persuasion map. And the persuasion map was really an outline of how they were going to compose their final drafts. So once they completed the persuasion map, it's like they had this awakening moment and they realized that their paper was now basically written. They had taken notes, they understood. So after the persuasion maps were completed, it was now really easy for them to write their claim, or their what we called a thesis statement, and their rough drafts in their writer's notebook. And I chose to have them write the rough drafts in the writer's notebook so that everything would be organized and together, and they could refer back to their notes if they needed. So probably the most important thing they had to do was make a very clear claim or thesis statement. And I wanted their thesis statement to contain their opinion about the usage of solar energy or fossil fuels and 3 supporting facts to back up their opinions. Their final task in their writer's notebook was to complete a peer review chart for each other, and this allowed them to have a peer review their work, make sure that it was easy to understand, And also their peer had to critique their essay. So they got a real feel of how their essay really sounded to another person. Because it's easy to correct your own work because you know what you're supposed to write. So I wanted to illustrate to them that you really need someone else to read your paper because that person didn't write the paper and they will instantly see if something is missing or something needs to be corrected. Okay, and then it was time to grade the final drafts that the students had written. And while I was grading each one, I had a copy of the rubric, a hard copy, so that I could easily check off the score that I wanted them to have for each of those 7 criteria. So as you can see on the paper, all I did was make a check mark, and sometimes I had to make notes and explain why I chose the categories that I did, but they could clearly see from the grading rubric what criteria they had to meet and what their score was. Okay, what we're looking at now is an actual LDC paper that was submitted by a student. And at first glance, when you read through this paper, it seems like a really good paper. The student got his opinion across. He does state a lot of facts in his paper. However, upon closer inspection, you will see that the paper is missing some critical elements to be an exemplary LDC paper. So starting with his introductory paragraph, it's a nice paragraph. It's well written. His grammar was good, but what he's lacking in this paragraph is a clear and concise thesis statement or his claim statement. And that is a critical part of writing these LDC papers. And without that, you really don't have that guiding map for the rest of the essay. He goes into talking about the cost effectiveness of using solar power and how the large basis for his opinion was based on the fact that fossil fuels are non-replenishable. And he felt really strongly about that, and you can see that because he even underlined and bold printed the fact that fossil fuels are non-replenishable resources that cause global warming, oil spills, and more global warming. Then in his next paragraph, he goes on to talk about solar power and how we can use backup batteries for them, and really referring to the fact that you can take a home or business completely off the grid and not have to rely on fossil fuels at all. But without the thesis statement, though, it's kind of a moot point that he's making because he isn't really citing evidence. He isn't giving a clear statement as to what that paragraph should have been about. And the same goes true for his last body paragraph. And as you can see, he feels really strongly about this. He really liked to use bold print and all caps. But the thing is students need to understand that just because you're using the all caps and the bold print and the underlining, that doesn't make your paper better. It actually is just a huge grammatical error. So these are the kind of things that we can teach through using these papers, and all of these things that he has done that aren't perfect, I like to call them teachable moments. And then in his concluding statement, I had instructed students in their conclusion to restate their thesis and to reiterate their opinion about the usage of solar energy or fossil fuel, whichever one they chose. And again, he's missing that. So overall, great paper. This would be a nice paper for an ordinary assignment before we started following the core standards. However, it's missing the critical elements that are necessary to call this an exemplary LDC paper.